Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. We're here on a Tuesday to recap episodes 5 and 6 of Breaking Bad, where we really dive into Walter dealing with cancer. We see an intervention of sorts. We really get to know a lot of different characters, including one of my favorites, Tuco Salamanca, who we'll get into him. But Shay, it looks like your Maple Leafs are going to be playing Montreal in the first round for the first time since '79.
Yep.
How do you feel about the matchup before we get into to Breaking Bad?
Good, yeah. I'm excited. I think that they've been exciting matches all year. You think about how many overtimes they've been in, and I think these two teams match up really well. I don't think it's going to be an easy walk for my old Leafs, but I think they'll prevail. I'm thinking like a 5-6 game series probably. If Montreal finds a scoring touch and maybe get some depth scoring, maybe they push a 7 gamer, and that would be interesting as well. Even though my team doesn't seem to do well in those in the last few years, but
Yeah.
that's okay. I'm looking for something. What are your thoughts and feelings about the old MTL versus Toronto battle?
Yeah, as you know, I'm the biggest North Division fan there is. No, in all seriousness, it's good to see this matchup. I mean, it's hard to believe they've been in the same division. Like, it's not like they're playing Edmonton. You know, they've been in the same division since 1901. And they haven't played against each other since '79. That's crazy. I think it can be an interesting series. I mean, Carey Price's health is huge. Brendan Gallagher coming back. I mean, really the key cogs are, you got the unicorn and Josh Anderson. You got Tyler Toffoli. And if Kotkaniemi can play like he did last year, that's an X factor if he can bring anything to the table. But obviously your Leafs are heavy favorites.
Yeah, he was bodying guys last year, from what I can remember. Like, he was putting some damage on that old Philadelphia Flyers team. Yeah, exactly, and giving Crosby a hard time. So you see what happened last year. It didn't look like they had much of a team going against the star-studded Penguins, and they kind of won that one. So I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, you're right. If Carey Price is just a no-show, then I think it'll be a cakewalk, unfortunately, for all you Habs fans out there, Calder and Cole and whoever else.
Yeah, the couple other million around the world.
Yeah.
But tonight when it comes to Breaking Bad, two really different episodes. Episode 5 titled Gray Matter, we get to hear from Elliot and Gretchen, which are two characters that will show up throughout the show, including in season 5, which they play a big role in. We also get to see, like I mentioned, Tuco off the top. These two episodes, how would you define both of them?
Yeah, they're both very interesting. I think that episode 6 is probably the best of the season. So it was a great watch. And episode 5 a little slower, but both episodes introduced new characters. One a little bit more lighthearted than the other. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, no, overall both were much better episodes than I would say last week. And that the infamous line at the very end of episode 5 just gets me every time. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, that's if it's not a GIF, it's gotta be, they gotta make it one. I think that's a good one. But we start episode 5 with Jesse applying for a job, and we see him. He's got a suit on. He's got some good duds, and he's basically telling, I think I can be a great asset to your company. It looks like a realty company to me. It's either a realtor or a bank. But he said he's got sales experience, or selling drugs. Doesn't mention that, but so he thinks he's going great, and the guy's like, yeah, like I think we can hire you. He's like, oh, great, but the manager says, well, just not as a salesman right away. And he goes, oh, okay. So he goes, I think we have a misunderstanding. And he opens up the window, and we see this buffoon. You think of somebody holding up a sign, waving it like, sales, come here. And Jesse's basically looking out and thinking, oh, there's no way in hell I'm taking this job.
Yeah. I at first when I watched this, I thought maybe this was a recap of him before, like maybe before he was cooking and stuff, like trying to get on his feet and, maybe turning to that because of how hard it was. But yeah, we see Jesse trying to maybe turn a leaf here. We saw an episode pretty recently with his family and, how they impacted his life and how they kind of view him at the same time. So maybe he's trying to prove the prove to them that he still has a lot of potential within life. But yeah, no, it's good. And then obviously he goes out, he's frustrated, but who follows him but this buffoon in the money suit? And so behold, it's a Badger, one of the great, I guess I would say the great friends, but one of Jesse's close friends throughout the show.
Yeah, Badger. This actor, we've seen him in this. He's also in The Office. He plays a small character in The Office, which is funny to me. But yeah, Badger is he's wearing the money suit. He's waving the sign, and he's a complete juxtaposition because he loves the job. He's like, I'm an ex-con. I need to show that I can rehabilitate myself to the man. And so what does he do? He goes and smokes a joint with Jesse, and he says, you cooking any crystal? And he goes, I would love to cook with you, man. Like, let's do it. Like, we should partner up. And Jesse's really turned off because this Badger, we can tell he's not the brightest bulb, just right off the bat. But Jesse gets back in his car. He's looking at the classified ads, and he's basically looking at Badger doing this job. And I think for me, Shay, I thought, okay, he knows this is probably what the job he's going to have to take eventually, but also he sees a friend that could potentially leave this shitty job to work with him.
Right. Yeah, I never thought of it like that, but that's a fair point of kind of maybe getting somebody to also do your dirty work. Badger mentioned that he has connections for stuff that Jesse needs. Yeah. It's Jesse needs to make. What's it called? Pseudo, yeah. And it's basically, is it like cold stuff? Like
it's like the cold medicine. That's one of the key ingredients to making methamphetamine.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so he needs, he's got the connect for that. So Badger's there, but I never really put into perspective that maybe he was doing Badger a favor by maybe helping him out and trying to make a quick buck for sure.
So we don't know that they're partnering up really, but it's assumed because Jesse leaves the car and he starts walking towards Badger, which we'll talk about later. We then go to Walter and Skylar driving to a party, and they're dolled up. Skylar's obviously very pregnant, but she's got a dress on. Walter's got the suit and tie looking fly. And we learn that they're going to his former partner, Elliot's birthday party. And it's his former colleague, still friend, but you can tell right away that there's some jealousy and there's some just wounds when it comes to this relationship.
Yeah, exactly. One thing they mentioned on the car drive there, it's like, oh, well, it's a no gift party, or he said it's a no gift party. They talk about how stupid his gift was, which we'll get to in a second. But and then obviously you get there, it's classic. Like they've got this mountain full of gifts. And first thing you walk in, this guy's very wealthy. He's very educated from what they talk about. And you're right. Like they even when that first interaction they have, it's very much like, hey, how are you? But at the same time, you do sense a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of maybe, I don't know, a little bit of hurt pride by Walter, I would say, in a sense. And then followed up, we find out that Elliot is married to Gretchen, who, if we remember a couple episodes before, Walter was having flashbacks of this woman that he was, in this classroom with. They kind of, I would say, having, without maybe stating they had an intimate relationship, I would say that they gave off that feeling. Yeah. So even when they embrace, you can tell that it's a bit more of an embrace to your friend's wife.
Yeah, the hug's definitely weird. And Walter didn't want to really hug her, I think, but so they have this weird interaction. They talk about, whatever stupid run of the mill stuff, how great Skylar looks when she's pregnant, which I always find funny. This is just general talk about life here. Do you think any pregnant woman would buy that? Do you think that's smart to say that? I don't know. It seems like kind of condescending to me. I've never said it to a pregnant woman, but I don't know if I ever will, but I'm just kind of running the idea off you.
So you mean when someone says you look good, like you look good for being like, say, so like 8 months pregnant or, 8.5 months. Yeah. I mean, I think it is just kind of like a cliche kind of line that you throw at somebody just to, I don't know, just to make them feel good or to say something nice instead of saying nothing at all. But yeah, not something I would use either. I just, say congratulations or, why? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. The the woman knows she doesn't look great.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a guy.
I mean,
It's like somebody that gets in a car accident. They don't look that.
You look good. You look good for being in a car accident.
Yeah. Oh God, I was expecting way worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. That's how it kind of. You know what? You're right. That's how it does come off, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to have like a mother or a mom, and see what their take on that is.
Right. Yeah.
We'll
I'm gonna text my mother after the podcast and see what she says.
Yeah.
I
Fair
wonder if
enough.
somebody said it to her when she was pregnant. She goes like, beat it, chum. But so they leave, but they eventually come back. And Walt and Elliot are talking about how we learned some things. They went to grad school together. They started the company called Gray Matter together, and the gray is due to Walter White. So it's about just they're using color schemes and different thoughts of the periodic table when they started Gray Matter, studying black holes and other things in chemistry. And we learned that Walter left the company, but it's in this conversation, it sounds like he left the company, but it was almost like he was asked to leave the company because him and Gretchen started dating Elliot. And with them being married and being partners, I think he was strongly pushed to leave Gray Matter.
Yeah, and it's not said in the conversations at the party, but you're right. You get that vibe that it was not it was not maybe a mutual departure from him leaving Gray Matter. So yeah, there's more into it, and I think the show goes more in depth into that situation and why that actually happened. Yeah. And even we see more of Gretchen and Walter's relationship within, I think, the next episode or maybe even the end of this episode.
Yeah, totally true. And then we see this awkward interaction where he's not with Gretchen or Elliot, but Walter's like, well, yeah, I was with Gray Matter and I left. So the guy's like, well, you must be loaded. And he goes, no, I pivoted into education. He goes, well, what university are you teaching at?
And Walter he takes a drink.
Just takes a drink so he doesn't have to answer, being a high school chemistry teacher, which I just thought was brilliant from the show.
Yeah, no, good writing for sure.
Yeah. We'll get into Jesse and Badger, but I thought we'll just stay with Elliot here, Elliot and Walter. We see Elliot starts talking to Walter. They're reminiscing about their time together. And it's this weird scene where Elliot offers Walter a job. And at first it seems sincere, but even, watching it for the fourth or fifth time, you pick up on certain things. And Elliot's kind of looking over his shoulder the whole time. He's kind of like, Walter's like, I have no experience, and I haven't been. I'm just looking at the periodic table with grade 12 kids. Like I don't know nothing. He goes, well, we could use your experience and this and that. And Walter eventually tells him that he has cancer.
Yeah. Yes. I don't even think that he tells him that he has cancer. I think that it comes out through Skylar tells Elliot through a conversation they had before. And you're right. It's a very awkward, very like, yo, you like come work for us. Like we could use you. You're a new set of eyes. You'd be a great employee here. And all of a sudden it turns to like, yeah, like I kind of know you have cancer. Like, let me do you a favor. We find out later that Elliot just, Walter refuses the job knowing, if you haven't picked up.
He took it in his pride because it was almost like a charity that he offered him the job, not because he thought he was going to be good at it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and of course, Walter, if you haven't figured it out by now, is probably the most proud man in the world at this point, at least in the show. So he's like, no, if I'm going to battle this, I'm going to battle this on my own. Financially, I'm going to take it on my own. So he's pissed. Obviously, Skylar, he's like, I can't believe you told her. I can't believe you told him, And then Skylar's pissed because, when she finds out that he offered Walt the job and to pay for his treatment, he refused. So obviously this is bearing throughout the rest of the episode, and they're obviously very upset at each other. But I don't know how to take it. What do you think? Do you think, looking back, was it a right move? Do you take that knowing that maybe you could pay it back in the future? I don't know. I don't know how to take it.
Yeah, I obviously you want to live, of course, but I see his point. It would be hard to take the money from somebody you really don't like.
Yep.
And he clearly doesn't like Elliot. He doesn't want to go to the party. I think he still has some feelings for Gretchen deep down somewhere. And I know myself, if I had to take money from somebody I really didn't enjoy and they'd have that over my head the rest of my life, I don't know if my pride could deal with it. It would be tough for me because I'd be like, they'd be their whole life saying, "Hey, you son of a bitch, you're only alive because of me," and I would that would bother me. How about you?
Yeah, I think I feel eerily similar. We don't exactly know that to the extent of how much Walt doesn't like Elliot, but that comes out, very within the future. But yeah, exactly. I think it'd be very tough. You're right, saying that like you had that over your head the entire time. Like, yes, you're basically alive because I let you lie, like I let you live. So if anyone hasn't seen where this is going, it's going to come to the grand finale of this episode where Walter says the infamous line. But I kind of forget what happens in between. So they get home and then there's this awkward breakfast where
they
there's
say
just
nothing.
there's just this tension where Walter's just like aggressively eating his breakfast. Skylar's just staring him down like, oh, it's not good. It's not a good scenario.
No, Walter Jr. is just like sitting there chewing bacon, and he's just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take the bus," and he leaves the two parents together, staring at each other. And there was a good line with Elliot I forgot. I wrote down in my notes. He says to Walter, "We have excellent health care."
That's what it is. Yeah.
That was the telltale sign that Skylar's like smiling over her shoulder, like, and like you mentioned, Walter just loses it on her. But
yeah,
this, I think this is interesting because it shows Walter and how he progresses in the show. His character, you mentioned the pride in him having more than any other man maybe ever in history. I've put him right up there with Tony Soprano. He cannot let anybody do anything for him. He hates accepting help, even from people he loves. Like, he loves Hank, and he doesn't like to accept help from Hank, of all people, who he shouldn't worry about owing a favor to.
Yep, exactly. And it comes out later in the intervention, which we'll get to. Also, small point: they come when they get to this party, they're very, very overdressed.
Yeah,
which I thought was hilarious. Watching that the second time, I might not have picked up on the first time about how funny that is, but looking back, like Walter's in this like I don't know, like 4 or 5 piece suit. Everyone else is kind of dressed down. When they get in there, they automatically say like, "Oh, I guess like we didn't get the memo on beige," because literally everyone in there is wearing beige, which I thought was like a very science nerdy thing for them to do.
Yeah, Elliot is like such a little kid too, because he opens up all his gifts in front of people, which that
so bad.
shows him too, like how he is, because Elliot's like the smart, rich guy, but he's a loser at the same. Like, he's not, he's not Casanova by any means.
Yeah, he did get an Eric Clapton signed guitar, so I'll give props
that was I agree, that was cool. So he gets a little bit cooler, but he's still
a loser.
Yeah, still sucks. Pivoting to Jesse and Badger, the new pair, and they're going to cook. Jesse and Badger take the RV into the desert, and they start cooking. And what we see, and it's only episode 5, and Jesse and Walter, I believe, only had one cook together. But Walter had rules, and he had standards about cleanliness and how they cook and how they did things. And Jesse clearly adopted them because, either consciously or subconsciously, Mr. White is his mentor still in this moment. And he says, "Badger, we're doing things the right way, no messing around." And we go through this montage of, the song playing with Jesse cooking, where Badger is doing everything wrong. He's eating at the station. He's looking at Hustler magazines. He's putting food in his nose. He's, putting on the mask and breathing like Darth Vader. And clearly we're seeing some frustration from Jesse towards his new partner.
Yeah. If you could think of a child, that's basically what this man is. it's funny, like it is very, but to work with something like that obviously would be just extremely frustrating. And it's funny, like you think of like the two, if you compare the two times, well, the first time went so much better. It was cleaner. It was very specific. This time it's just very messy. You have basically one guy doing the entire work while the other guy is goofing off. Sounds like every group project I was ever in with Aaron Sock. If our listeners know who that is, that's about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just very funny scene. But yeah, and then finally we get to the product, and Jesse's sitting there, he's examining it, he's looking at it. Badger's got eyes like, like going crazy. He's like, oh, this is great, like this is gonna sell. I can't wait to get like my hands on this cash. And Jesse just isn't having it.
No. Yeah, he sees that. He goes, it's shaded. It's it's blurry. It's not supposed to be like that. And again, standards of Walter, it was 99.1% pure. And Jesse said, something's not right. He throws the entire batch into the ground. Badger freaks out. He goes, I would have smoked that. And, Jesse says, no, it's only for our customers. And he says, we're going to do it again and again until we get it right. And Badger just doesn't he's not a hard worker. He doesn't, he's a wise ass slacker, and he is not on board with this plan.
No. And this is the first time we see that, the effects that Walter's had on Jesse and how he's going to do business from now on, because he really takes this pride in throughout the rest of the show. Before, he's adding chili pepper to his meth. He was, maybe not as strict as he was before, but now it's just like Walter said, he's got standards and he's got to live up to them because he knows that's what the customers are going to be looking for.
Yeah. So they cook again, and Badger's like over his shoulder, like just staring at him, and he's got his arm crossed, and Jesse's examining it again. Like you said, he goes, we can do better. And Badger's like, no, you're not throwing that out. Like we're selling this. I'll smoke it. And Jesse's like, no. And they start fighting. And, they do this funny scene where Badger, he had the sign. His famous move was the helicopter. So he puts Jesse over his shoulder, goes, helicopter, bitch. And throws him. But Jesse does get the upper hand. He throws some powder into Badger's eyes, pushes him out the door. And what does he do? He leaves him in the middle of the desert by himself. He takes the RV and goes, which not the last time we'll see somebody do this, but it was clearly a big scene. You're leaving a friend and, of a business partner alone in the desert with no water, food, or anything.
Yeah, we don't know the exact whereabouts of where this is. Obviously, it's somewhere within
it's secluded. We know that.
So yeah, he's got a long ass walk to go, and yeah, you could think that you would think that their friendship would be over after something like this, but Badger's a recurring character that I don't know, he just gets more lovable every time you see him.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously we're just talking about this episode, but we know the future of the show. This is the worst we see of Badger, because every other time he's fun. He's I don't know if the writers decided to make him a little bit more endearing and likable, because in this episode he isn't that much. The first scene he was, but after this we really see a different Badger throughout the show.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is the last time we see Pinkman. But of course we go back to Walt, and is the intervention this episode, Juggy, or is it the episode 6?
Yeah, it's no, it is this episode. So
I guess the drinking scene, I guess we can get to that probably, where
yes, Walt Jr. Yeah. So Walt Jr., he's pissed at his father, and he's I think he's still trying to find himself. Clearly he's a young kid. We've all been through this where we're trying to find our niche, and we're trying to work through high school and life. And he's hanging out with, I wouldn't say the wrong crew, but they're definitely a crew of friends that are using him. They all want to buy beer, but they're not going to do it. They say, you're the cripple. Somebody will do it for you out of pity.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes up to this guy and he says, hey, we forgot our IDs. Could you buy us a 6-pack? And the guy says, that's a felon, right? And he goes, no, it's not. And he goes, yes, it is. And he pulls out a badge, and his two friends take off, and he's left holding the bag.
Yeah, it's a bad look. And when I first saw this, I thought that's probably a one in, I don't know, like 1,000th chance of running to a law enforcement officer when you're trying to buy liquor. Most people would probably just say no, but
Right.
of course this guy's doing his job. And who does Walter Jr. call? He doesn't call his father. He calls Hank because at this time maybe he's still pissed off at his dad. Maybe he thinks Hank has more pull when it comes to law enforcement, obviously. So Hank
I
comes
would have called Hank too.
for the law enforcement reason,
Yeah.
or for
And
another reason.
at his age, like I would have called my grandfather before my parents.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Just
I
because,
guess.
and that's not a slight against that's me more being not aware that my parents are going to be mad, but they're obviously they want the best for you, and they're not going to kick your ass or anything. This is that's not. But the situations where you're like, I want to call my grandmother or my grandfather other than my mother and father. I don't know if that's ever happened in your life.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's been times. But yeah. So he calls Hank, and of course Hank's like, I'm not mad at you for trying to buy beer. I'm more mad at you for not calling your father instead of me. Like that's gonna really make him upset and piss him off. So it brings him home. Obviously his mother's pissed at him, and then they say, Hank's like, well, he's, the whole weed thing and the whole beer and
I love this.
Skylar's like, what? Weed? And what's the sister's name?
Marie.
Marie. So Marie's like, well, you basically told me without telling me that Walter Jr. is smoking pot.
Yeah.
And Skylar goes, no, it's Walt. Like he even says he likes it. And Hank's just like
laughing.
He's like, I didn't think he had it in him. He's kind of proud in a sense, because like, Walter is obviously like this nerdier, more safe than, dangerous kind of man. So he obviously couldn't see him doing that. But no, this is when they say like we got to sit Walter down and we have to express how we feel, and that kind of leads into one of the best intervention scenes I've ever seen. Even though it's not very long, I think it's great because
I think it's great too.
Yeah, because of, for one, I think that there's some humor in there, but I think the Walter's ending is just it was perfect.
Yeah,
and it perfectly describes how someone dealing with cancer may see their last couple years and how they want to spend it. I'll let you take it away.
100%. And I agree completely with you about it being a great, because we've seen them. Some of them are, they got to be serious, and this one was. But like you said, it adds humor without it being so blatant that they're adding humor, because they're trying to be serious, but it's the characters being themselves. And, it starts off with Skylar, who's clearly emotional, and she obviously wants her husband to live. And who doesn't want their family member to fight? And they have this talking pillow, which I love too. Walter wants
what does it say? I tried to remember what it said on it, but I can't. It was like something little things. It's like live for the little things, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. It's something really corny.
Yeah, it was like a Hallmark card pillow.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got the talking pillow. Walter's like, can I speak? And she goes, no, I have the talking pillow. So she goes and she says it's okay to accept help, and we all of us want you to live here. And she goes, so who wants to go next? And she goes, why not you, Hank? And he's thrown off guard. And he goes, yeah. He goes into this weird / funny poker metaphor about how he's been dealt a lot of bad hands in life. I've been dealt a 5-2 offsuit, but I stay in there and I get to the river and I got a full house. And Marie is just like, Hank, what the hell are you talking about? And he goes, okay, that's not what I was trying to say. So your base is loaded, bottom of the ninth, okay? Are you going to sit back and let the pinch hitter take it? Or are you going to swing and just say, hey, life, this is mine. And he's so befuddled, and nobody knows. He asked Walter, do you know what I'm saying? And Walter's like, no, Hank, no, I don't.
Oh, it just comes off so bad because like, you feel like his heart's in a good place, but his eulogies or his metaphors, I guess, are just awful. They just don't make, well, they do make sense, but like at the same time, like they're not helpful, they're not sincere. So it's just like, what are you saying?
Like, yeah, he's not being direct. Like, just say, like, get the treatment or don't. Like, he doesn't even give an opinion, really, of what, you know. So then Walter Jr. goes, and I love Walter Jr. Like, I think we both said that in the podcast. I think he's a great character and a great actor too. I think for him playing the role, this was powerful. I thought this was a really powerful moment and great acting from him. He calls Walter a pussy. And he says, all the stuff I've been through, and he points to his crutches, obviously. And he says, you're going to give up and not do a little chemotherapy. You're afraid of a little chemotherapy. And I thought that was really powerful. And that going from Hank to Walter Jr., I think was a perfect transition.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how they did that. They didn't go from, I thought automatically it would go from Skylar to Walter Jr., who sitting side by side, to Marie to Hank, but they do it in a way that brings a little bit of comic relief and a little bit difference in every person that the pillow touches, in a specific order. So yeah, no, I thought that was good. He delivered a great scene. You know, he's like, I'm pissed, like I'm fucking upset, which, I mean, anyone would be like, that's, you know, you feel like you're being given up on, which is perfect time. And, you know, he gets emotional, he's upset. I think he starts tearing up.
Yeah.
And then we move on to Marie, who feels a little differently.
Yeah. And, you know, we used to expect Marie to, you know, be on board with the family, but she goes, you know, I'm going to be honest. I'm a healthcare worker. I work at hospitals. I go in the ER. I work in the ER where a lot of people have cancer. And she says, Walter, I think you should do whatever you want to do. And if that's not take treatment, that's fine. Because I see people in the ICU and they're miserable in their last couple of months of life. And clearly Skylar loses it on Marie because she's like, Marie, you want my husband to die and all this. And Hank chimes in. I think Marie's got a good point there. Like,
it's a classic, like, agreeing with your wife scenario where you're like, yeah, I better hop on board here in case I get in trouble later.
Right. So he's like, yeah, I think Marie's solid point there. And so they're talking about that. And then they're fighting. Everybody's yelling and shouting. And Walter finally, you know, steps up, grabs the talking pillow, like whistles to get everybody's attention. He goes, it's my time to talk now. And he basically says, I want to control. I don't want to be sick. And you guys remember me as this zombie that can't get out of bed the last couple of months of my life. And I need tubes to live. And I'm in the hospital. He says, I want to live the way I want to live. And he basically says, you know, this is, I'm not getting the treatment, and live with it because it's my choice. It's my life. And this is the way I want to go out.
Yeah. And I thought it was really, really strong when he just kind of basically goes over the fact that, like, a lot of his choices throughout his life were not chosen by him or chosen, you know, even for him maybe. So he just says, like, if this is the final choice, I should have a say in what I'm going to do. So I thought that was really strong because, you know, there's a lot of people out there, even with this, you know, maybe, you know, you're a young kid who your parents kind of have custody over you. Well, they're going to tell you, they're obviously going to want you better. So they're going to do everything they can. They put you through treatments. Or maybe you're very old, you're being looked after by somebody else. Well, you know, we're going to do whatever we can and we're going to get you sick. And obviously it's hard for anyone not to think about one of their loved ones who's been sick before. And, you know, trying to remember past that, because that's obviously a big part and that's coming to the end.
Yeah.
But, you know, I always, like, for me, I always just try to think of, like, the better things behind that. You know what I mean? Like better memories and things that they've done in their life, you know, beyond being sick, because obviously that's what they wanted to be remembered for. And that's what Walter kind of says. He wants to skip over that whole scene of, you know, being sick, that way that all they can remember by him is just his life and, like, how he chose to live it and not
Right.
You're like being bedridden and choking down 30 pills, which we'll see soon
We'll
now.
see. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely get it. You know, I think we both had people we know go through it, and it's hard to even visit people that have cancer because they're so miserable, and you know that you're somebody that you love and you don't want to see them in that state. But Walter, so it leaves that scene and he wakes up and Skylar's not there in bed with him, and he kind of looks over and at her bookshelf. It's a book about cancer and what to eat when you have cancer and what having a baby, obviously a baby book. And I think this was really a big thing for Misha because he leaves his bed, he goes and hugs her while she's doing the dishes, and he just mouths in her ear, "Okay, I'll do it."
Mm-hmm. So do you think the turning point for him was kind of looking over and seeing those books and, smells her pillow, smells her, whatever you put on after lavender maybe?
I think just thinking of my grandparents, I think when you have cancer, you live for other people. You're not living for you, because you're sick. And Walter, he's got like a 95% chance he's going to die. Even if he gets his treatment, you have lung cancer, eventually you're going to die.
Yep.
But I think he said, I want to see my child be born. I want to have leave my wife as a widow with a disabled kid. I want to be in their lives for as long as I can. And maybe that finally sinks in for him.
Yeah. Cause I mean, we don't see a discussion. We don't hear anything about a turning point. All we really see throughout this final part of the episode is him basically in bed and turning over. And that's about it. And that's all it really takes for him to say, okay, I want to continue living because I can. And obviously that leads to the great final scene that we see. Oh, I guess there's a phone call in between now and the final scene. Sorry.
Yeah. Gretchen calls him after his first chemotherapy session.
Yeah.
And while he actually pulls up to Jesse's house and he's about to go into Jesse's, but Gretchen calls and she says, we'll pay for your treatment. And he goes, no, the insurance worked itself out and it's going to be fine. And she goes, oh, well, that's great. And then she says, I'm always here for you. And it's, again, they clearly have a past, and Skylar, we should also point out, believes that Elliot is paying for the treatment. And that's a lie. But she is in the dark again. She didn't know he had cancer for over a month, and she believes that Elliot is paying, which is another lie that Walter is telling his wife.
Yeah, exactly. And to revisit that Gretchen thing, I mean, on the phone, she starts tearing up. Like it's almost like she still cares a lot, like almost maybe too much for someone who's married, I would say, about Walter, because clearly she's very stricken up. Walter plays it very cool and calm on the phone. He doesn't really give her much, but clearly it doesn't take much for her to, really care and obviously get super emotional about the subject.
Right. No, great point. She clearly still likes him quite a bit. And we don't see Skylar get jealous, which was interesting choice from the show, but maybe that's just a stereotype of women. I think men do that more than women. So in the grand scheme, like you said, the big line is the last one. Walter's walking around the yard looking for Jesse. Jesse's in the garage with all his meth equipment, and he goes, "Hey," and Walter just sees him. He walks just outside the garage and says, "Want to cook?"
Just cut off. It's a great scene, and like we can't even do it justice because of like the tension and Jesse's so angry at the time because he probably thought he'd never see Walt again, obviously.
Yeah.
From the last discussion, if you can remember the last discussion, Jesse visited Walt at his house, and Walter basically said, "I never want to see you ever again." And sure enough, here he is. Yeah, Walter's the one crawling back. I also think it says a lot about Walter's pride that he's, he did say, sorry for how things happened, or I should have treated you like that. It's just like, you want to get back to business in a very casual, meaning way.
Right. No, so true. So that's how episode 5 ends, and we bring it to episode 6. That's called Crazy Handful of Nothing. And it starts with this little montage of Walter carrying the meth equipment back into the RV, but he sees the broken glass on the floor and everything, but it pivots to Walter being bald, him walking through a street with a bag of cash, glass everywhere, a bunch of really crazed looking people around him, and he's walking back towards the Aztec, but we have no idea why, but we know clearly Walters has gone through a bit of a metamorphosis.
Yeah, and it's. I think we said this the first recap that we did for 1 and 2. It's this kind of foreshadowing they do very early on in the show. They don't do as much later on, but yeah, this is another case of it where we're seeing something how the final scene ends, but obviously we don't know what's happening in between that, because like at first you're like, why is he bald? But I mean, obviously it's cancer, so he's gonna get rid of his hair. A lot goes on in this episode. Like we said, it's probably the best episode of the season for whoever's watching it. And it's definitely worth your full attention.
Yeah, this episode has a lot of detail and a lot of action. So we pivot to Walter getting treatment, and he lies to her again about getting Elliot's checks. No, I got it in the mail. I put it in my credit union account. It's all good. And he pays the woman the $5,000. He says, wait till Monday. We see that again in this episode. But we do start to see the effects of cancer, of the treatment. He's in class lecturing about, one of the key elements in this episode. I wrote it down here because it comes up at the end. Fulminated mercury, which it's like an explosive device that is used in chemistry. That's an element that we'll talk about it later. It's pretty cool, but it acts as an explosion. And he's talking about that, but I can't get his thoughts right because he keeps getting nauseated and he's kind of lightheaded. So he says, start reading chapter 6. And we see him for the first of a couple times in this episode, have to go to the bathroom and throw up.
Yeah. Just a key example of what chemotherapy does to someone, if you didn't know already. Nauseation is obviously a huge factor into that. So, and we see a character that I think is only in this one episode, but he's obviously a very key character in Hugo, the school's custodian. And, Hugo's like, it's okay, Mr. White. Like, I got it. Like, I'll clean up. So maybe Hugo has some insight into what Walter's going through and kind of feels bad for him. We see him even give him gum at one point throughout it because he's like, here you go. And Walter's I would say very thankful and very, gracious towards Hugo because obviously he's doing him a big favor.
Yeah, Hugo just seems like a really nice guy. He's just a good custodian. I can think of many that I've, I think of Donnie from the elementary school over the years. They're just really good people. And Hugo gave me that vibe. We see Walter's losing weight. He gets dizzy, and while they're cooking out in the desert, Jesse's outside reading, and Walter just starts coughing up a lung, and he has to run. He has to run outside because he's having a coughing fit. And Jesse actually figures out when Walter opens up his shirt that he has lung cancer.
Yeah, and this is a great eyes, I guess, and very detailed. Because the first time I watched this, I was like, I had no idea. I was like, well, just because you're coughing them, it doesn't mean you have lung cancer. But clearly, Jesse sees the I guess the shaped part within within Walter's chest that gives it away that he's getting therapy for it, and he puts 2 and 2 together. Well, this is why you're cooking, because clearly you're trying to leave your people. He says something for when you're gone. And Jesse says, "Oh, my aunt had it as well." And Walter says, "Well, how long did she last?" And Jesse's like, "Not long." I don't even know. I think he said 7.
He might have said a couple months. Like it was.
Oh, is it a couple? Okay, I thought it was longer than that.
But throwaway comment, but Walter was clearly like, "How long she last?"
Yeah.
I was hoping for a better answer.
Yeah, and I mean that was an extreme case, but who knows? Clearly, Jesse has some insight of what Walter's going through because he sees someone he loves go through that as well.
Right.
And yeah, and then all I was going to say is Walter's too sick. He says, "I can't do it, Jesse. So you take over." So this is kind of the first time we see Jesse take the reins by himself, finish maybe the batch that Walter was going to do step by step. Walter's like, "I'll be right here. If you have any questions, just come out and talk to me." But he just can't do it anymore.
Right. Yeah. And this is interesting because Jesse clearly is not 100% confident because he's like, whoa, me. But I think Walter giving him that vote of confidence made him more confident because we mentioned him being his mentor, being someone he looked up to. Walter, the great chemist, saying, Jesse, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's like anybody. It's a great coach. It's someone we look up to saying, Shamus, you can do this. It's right. Like me saying to you, you can do it, man. Like I'm joking. But
I think that I can do it.
Yeah.
I'm 100% confident when you say that. I was supposed to go.
But it's interesting because at first all we heard was, you're going to sell, I'm the cook. I don't want to hear about the customers. I don't want to know any of them. If they know my name, we're done. Yeah. But clearly Walter's sick and he has to give Jesse a little bit more of the responsibility here.
Yeah. And, shortly after he's done, we see a scene where basically Jesse just kind of driving around and he's dealing. He's also smoking a little bit, which means he's still got his bad habits. He's going everywhere from, the Crystal Palace, which we mentioned in the last episode, to some shacks, to the laundromat, selling to businessmen. It's actually kind of a cool scene because there's no talking, but obviously you can see we did well. We got 26 big ones. And Walter's like, 26,000, that's it? Yeah. And Jesse's like, no, 2,600 and half of it's mine.
Yeah. He's like, oh, so I bought you a burner. So it's 1,300 minus the 50 I bought this burner for. Yeah. And Walter is pissed. He goes, but I made £1. And he goes, so you expected me to cook another one today after your slow ass? And he goes, I was slinging meth, making bank, bitch. And Walter basically says, you need to find a wholesale supplier. We need to wholesale our product. This makes no sense. $2,600 is not worth the risk. Yeah. Jesse's like, well, I had a supplier, but you killed him. And he goes, I had an in, you killed him too. So that's another good scene. But he says, come on, Jesse, you got to know somebody. And he goes, well, I heard the guy that's kind of running things now. His name's Tuco. But you can't just go to his place and start talking to him. That's not how it works. And Walter's basically grow some balls and go do it. And we will see that later on.
Yeah, exactly. And we get introduced to the legend. But yeah, obviously it's a big time player in the game. And Jesse said, you keep saying you need an in. You need someone to vouch for you, or else you're basically nothing. Because if you've seen a show before, well, if you don't have a vouch for you, well, there's likely chance you're a narc or you just don't know what you're doing.
Right. And so at this point, we think Jesse is not going to be able to do it, but he's like, I'll work on it. So we pivot back to the high school, and Walter's just kind of cleaning stuff up. He sees the Principal Carmen come in, who I think Walter has a crush on, but who wouldn't? I mean, she's a beautiful woman. And he's kind of cleaning stuff up, and she goes, do you have time for a visitor? And he goes, yeah, sure. And it's Hank. Hank comes in. He goes, that mask that we found in the desert, it had the school writing on it. And Walter's like, oh, really? And goes, are you missing any equipment? He goes, well, not to my knowledge. And he's asking him questions. Who's got access to the science lab? And he goes, well, me and Carmen, the vice principal, faculty, yada, yada, yada. And he goes, well, can I take a look? And Walter's like, yeah. And as we remember, he stole 2 masks, a lot of beakers, a lot of equipment. And he's told Hank, I think all the inventory should be good. And Hank gets in there and he basically looks at the inventory list and says, like, Walter, you got to do, but he basically scolds him and says, you got to do a better job here, because the school is going to look at you and be like, what the hell? Because you're missing all this. He's missing 2 masks, 4 beakers, 3 big pots. And he goes, clearly somebody had a meth cooking spree. They went on a shopping list and they took everything from here. And he goes, and Hank throws this little comment, you don't want somebody thinking you're cooking. And Walter's like, and then he just starts laughing. But it's an interesting scene for sure, because we see them have a little bit of a dynamic.
Yeah, it's a little tension there. And obviously, I mean, I think right away when Hank said it, I think I kind of knew he was joking. But I mean, it's in Walter's face, like, God, like the last person in the world you want to find out about this is probably Hank, because not only is he what he can do, but also for how close he is to you personally. And so during this, Walter gets a call, and it's Aaron, it's Jesse. Yeah. And Jesse's like, like my boy Skinny P.
Yeah.
he's got it in. He was on the same cell block as Tuco.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm gonna meet him, blah blah blah. So we finally see Tuco's, I wouldn't say lair, but it's his headquarters.
Yeah.
And it's very well manned.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You get there, you have to get scanned, like you have to get allowed in at the door. You get buzzed in, you walk up the stairs, you get a full pat down, and not a real nice pat down. They kind of throw you around, and you walk into this room, and there's like 3 or 4 massive guys. Like 3 of them look like sumo wrestlers. And then you got sitting at the table, Tuco Salamanca, played by Raymond Cruz. And Tuco is not in the show that long. And I actually, when we get to his death, I actually have information why he isn't in the show that long. But Raymond Cruz, I think, is a fantastic actor, because to get this angry and to get the energy that he has is such an impressive feat, and he can bring it time in and time out.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about his character, Doug, I'm sure you'll agree, is he's just unpredictable, and that's just how he plays, and that's exactly the feeling around him every time he's on screen, is because you still don't know what he's going to do, you don't know how he's going to act, what kind of mood he's in. We see 2 different meetings throughout this episode, and you could look at them and both say they're very different. He approached them very differently than each other, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but other than the fact that maybe he's bipolar and just out of here.
Yeah, he's definitely got some problems. They mentioned he's been in jail. He's got some anger issues. I think he's been there on assault and battery, possession. So he's got a rap sheet. And Jesse gives him, he brought a bag of meth with him. And basically it's a pound, a little short of a pound of meth. And Tuco's like, take a hit just to make sure it's not poison or anything. So Jesse does a hit, and then Tuco takes one himself, and we learn right away Tuco is not, he's like you said, he's unpredictable when he's sober. When he gets on drugs, this guy is a psychopath. He takes a hit, he starts screaming like this is the best stuff ever, like stabs the table with the knife. He's fired up, and he goes, yeah, that's some good stuff. And he goes, you gotta give me that. You gotta give me that. And he goes, you gotta be my supplier to Jesse. And he goes, deal. Like, yeah, let's do it. He goes, okay, yeah. What are you charging? Jesse's like, 35 large for the pound. And Tuco weighs it, and he said it's a bit short, but that's okay. It's okay. We'll figure it out. And he goes, okay, well, I'll see you next time. And Jesse goes, well, where's the money? And he goes, well, you don't trust me? And he goes, no, I trust you. But Tuco clearly takes it personal. But Jesse, to his credit, is not backing down. He's not leaving there without the money that he's owed.
Yeah, and we see him pull a brave move, maybe in something I would have done, but Jesse knows that he needs this money and he needs to get Walter's money at the same time. So what does he do? He grabs the bag and he tries to make a break for it. But like you said, there's 3 Samoa Joes in the back, and they quickly grab Jesse and they bring him back, and Tuco's like, you know what? Like, fine. Like you can have your money. No big deal.
Yeah.
So goes into his vault, grabs it, shows Jesse the money, puts it into a bag, goes to hand the bag to Jesse, and Jesse's hesitant, but sure enough, he goes to grab it, and he basically pulls it up and whacks Jesse right in the face, right just square in the head.
Yeah.
And continues just to lay a complete beat down on our good friend Jesse Pinkman, and it's not good.
Yeah, he beats him with the sack of cash. He kicks him multiple times, and Jesse's left bloodied and knocked out on the floor. But this is Tuco to a T. This guy is when you normally think of shows. Tony Soprano was unpredictable, but he was predictable when he needed to be, because when he was dealing business, he was a businessman. And you think of these characters that they can have a violent streak, but when they need to be really good businessmen, that's how they act. Tuco doesn't have that setting. He's a loose cannon, whether he's dealing business or, killing a loose end. That's just the way he rolls. And we see from the get-go, we've known the character for 5 seconds. This guy is not to be messed with.
No, exactly. And this is the first introduction. And like you said, we won't say too much about it, but he does have a short lifespan throughout the show. But obviously, every time he's on there, he's electric. So basically, what happens after this? I know that Walter, he's calling Jesse, he's trying to find out what happened, how the meeting went, because obviously Walter knows that he did approach him, but he just can't get a hold of him.
Yeah, so Walter's calling him multiple times, and he's starting to get worried. And it's the scene where they're playing. First, I guess we see Hank went to the school, and they think, well, who did it? Who's stealing all this equipment? And who gets arrested but Hugo, the nice custodian? And, Walt Jr. is like, what the hell's going on? Why is Hugo being arrested? And we learn that Hugo has a rap sheet. He's been arrested for possession, and they find a blunt in his car, and they do find some weed in his house. But he's not a meth dealer, but for right now, he's taking the heat for it, and he's arrested for Walter's crime.
Yes, and it's one of just the beginning, I think, of when Walter lets somebody else take a hit for him because of, to keep his dirty little secrets. And this I'm getting flashbacks almost of Your Honor, Juggy, where we saw that character, the judge. He was letting people take, just like Coffee Jones, take beatings for him and take lickings for him because he's got to hide his dirty little secret. And that's kind of what we see with Bryan Cranston's character in this show. Very, very eerily similar.
Yeah, no, completely true. So Hugo goes to jail, and Walter calls Jesse's phone again, trying to get a hold of him, and Skinny P answers. And Walter goes to the hospital, and Jesse's in the bed. He's got a neck brace on. We learn he's got cracked ribs. He's in so many painkillers, but he's not in a good spot right now. He got beat up pretty good. And Walter says, tell me everything I need to know about Tuco. And this is a sign of a different Walter than the chemist loser. He's morphing into a different character, because we see him cut his hair, and then he does go to see Tuco, but this is a progression of Walter's alter ego.
Yeah, we're definitely skipping over the fact that, I guess, like, throughout the episode, we're seeing Walter break down. He's going to meetings with his family. They're talking about how skinny he's getting, the pills on the table, and eventually he's losing hair. Yeah, he's never home. He's losing hair all the time. And eventually he calls it the infamous line by you. He goes Messier and just ends up cutting all of his hair off of his head.
Yeah.
And, that's just it's the start of a legendary look for Mr. Bryan Cranston. But no, you're seeing the full effects of what cancer does to somebody. And Walter, obviously, with, having to provide and having to, I guess, make ends meet in the association with his cancer. He's always away from home. He's always working. His family's really worried about him. Yeah. And he's just like, I just enjoy the alone time. I like going for walks in nature and just taking everything in.
Yeah, the cactus.
They're eating it up. Yeah, I like the cacti. Yeah, it's just so nice. And I just one with nature. I'm like, how would anyone eat this bullshit up?
Yeah, like one with nature. Yeah, that's a good one. So he doesn't tell his family he's gonna shave his head. He just does it.
Yeah.
He's in the shower and he notices he's losing it. He comes out and Walt Jr.'s like, Dad, you're a badass. And like you said, one of my favorite lines is you gotta go Messier. And he had cancer, he knows he's got to go mess, and he does. And I think he looks good with the bald head myself. I think he looks bad. I agree with Walt Jr. He looks badass. But he goes to Tuco's compound by himself, and he walks up and he's got a bag full of meth. And he says to the guys at the bottom, I'm here to see Tuco. I'm not leaving until I see him. And he's confident. He's cocky. They let him in. And again, they pat him down pretty good. And he goes in and he sits down and Tuco says, who the hell are you? He goes, Heisenberg. And he says, you beat up my partner, Jesse Pinkman. And Walter says, Tuco says, so you're the cook. He goes, yeah, I'm the cook. He goes, I want to supply methamphetamine to you. And Tuco's obviously interested. And he says, however, I want the 35 grand you owe me right now. And I want $15,000 for my partner's pain and suffering fees. And Tuco's completely, he's laughing in his face saying, oh yeah, I'm going to give you $50,000 essay. And just as about you see the guys behind Tuco are about to come maybe beat the shit out of Walter, maybe kill him. He goes, well, you made one mistake, Tuco. And he pulls out it looks like meth, but out of the bag of methamphetamine, he says, this isn't meth. And he throws it to the ground, and we see an explosion throughout Tuco's office.
Yeah, it's not even throughout the office. It's like all windows from the top floor are shattered, debris going on, to the ground, glass everywhere is outside. The whole room is a mess. And what does Walter do? He picks up the rest of the bag. That was just a shard out of maybe, a plastic baggie. He picks up the rest and says, I'm going to do it. And, automatically Tuco just kind of goes with his demands because he knows if he does that again. Yeah, it'll just this a little bit of a rock nearly took out the entire floor. So a whole baggie full would probably, I don't even know, it would shatter the building. It would corrupt the building for sure.
Yeah. So he gives Walter his money, but then Walter, still in business mode, says, I still want to supply to you. And Tuco's gained a little bit of respect for Walter because he's like, I think so. You're ballsy, man, old man. And he goes, okay, pound every week. Walter's like, no, it's got to be 2. And he goes, okay, fine. And he leaves the building with a stack of cash, and we pivot to where the episode started. He's walking out, building's destroyed. He's just walking to the car, everybody looking at him like he's, this crazy man. We hear sirens coming. He gets in the car, and we see him celebrate for the first time where he just, he's fired up that he has gotten a victory here and leaves the building with $50,000 in cash.
It's a huge win for himself, and he knows it. And it's the first time we see that he's willing to put himself in danger. Basically, the way I see it, in this episode there was a card game where he gambled, and he had nothing, but he
had 7 dudes offsuit.
He was willing to sacrifice it all. Well, that's a little bit of foreshadowing for the end of this. He was willing to give up his own life to get what he wants and get what he thought he deserved. And
right,
we see that multiple times throughout the show, but this is kind of the first big one where it's like, okay, Walter was crazy enough to basically kill himself, but he knew he was owed that money because of what he worked for it.
Yeah, so he gets the 50 grand in this, and then he sets up a deal to get $70,000 every week because of 2 pounds. So really huge victory. I agree, this is the best episode of the season. We have episode 7 next week, which is actually the season 1 finale. We'll do end of season 1 next week and the start of season 2, which both are. I'm trying to remember. I think both are very good episodes. But yeah, I thought both episodes, you get some character development more. You get Jesse and Walter back together. And Walter, we obviously see for the first time Heisenberg, which we will continue to see throughout the show.
It's a legendary intro to Heisenberg, the character, because, you know, he's kind of, it's like his alter ego a little bit. You know, there's Heisenberg, the meth dealing crazy lunatic, and then there's, you know, Walter White, the family man with a baby on the way.
Right.
Teaching chemistry.
Yeah, still the high school teacher, but at the same time cooking meth and taking down drug dealers. But we see Tuco. We're going to see more of Tuco and what he's capable of moving forward. But Walter got the upper hand in this sense, but that does not mean that he's going to get the upper hand in every one of these interactions with Mr. Salamanca.
No, we find out that Salamanca is much smarter than he maybe spreads on, and he's got a little bit of a, not past, I would say, but he's got some secrets that we also find out throughout season 2, which is what I look forward to.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that next week. Great episodes tonight and fun to break down. What do you got on the go the rest of your week, Shay?
Not a whole lot. I think we're gonna do a pretty quiet week. I think I'm gonna try to get some golf in. I didn't get any in last weekend, which was, you know, kind of stung a little bit, but you got first, before I break 90, you know, I gotta break 100.
Right.
So the first time I do that, I'm gonna announce it on the pod, let you know what I shot.
Right.
But other than that, not a whole lot. We got the NHL and NBA both winding down, and there's lots to go on with that. And I'll be following that to see where teams finally get placed. I believe they announced that there's going to be a Washington versus Boston
Saturday night. Yeah.
On Saturday night. Okay, so I'll be tuning in for that, because 2 great teams, and I mean, wow, what a if you think about, we'll go back to the Tom Wilson hit on Brandon Carlo. I mean, there's a lot of bad blood between these. Chara obviously leaving, so I think it's going to be a great series overall, and I'll be tuning into that one for sure. But what about you? I hear you have a great NFL pod coming tomorrow.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to do 1 or 2 every week throughout the NFL offseason here. As you know, the draft's over, free agency's pretty much done. We may see a little bit of movement, but rosters are close to being set. So I'm gonna look at free agency, look at the offseason, look where teams stand in their division. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the the AFC South. So that's Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. Talk about their additions. You know, you got the likes of Trevor Lawrence, you got J.J. Watt leaving, Carson Wentz coming over from the Eagles. So Deshaun Watson, who's still up in the air. So a lot to discuss there. I'm going to try and do a couple of those a week. Likely do a playoff preview show at the end of the week. And obviously watch some sports. And UFC 262 is this weekend as well, with Tony Ferguson getting back in the octagon, and Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler fighting for Khabib's vacated belt. So a lot of good sports this week. Wish Vancouver and Calgary didn't have to play like 4 more times. I don't plan on watching many of those games, but hopefully we get some good playoff hockey as you mentioned.
Yeah, you don't want to see old Johnny Hockey play there wishing around. Oh well, maybe, who knows. Maybe Johnny Hockey goes to Buffalo, and Jack Eichel, who wants out of Buffalo, goes to Calgary. Up in the air.
Jack Eichel would go to friggin' Hartford right now if he could.
Yeah, it's. I mean, he's gone down to Rochester next year, because there's no way he's going to be suiting up for the Sabres.
No, interesting to see what happens. He says he wants surgery. They don't want to have. So whoever trades for him, they got a lot to deal with there. But great episode tonight. We'll be back next week, finishing season 1, getting into season 2, breaking it all down, talking about the dealings with Tuco, and a lot of interesting things happen over the next couple episodes. So for me and Shamus, it's been fun as always. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk then.